My name is Jonathan. I'm an addict. I am very grateful to be here today. I'm very grateful to be alive. I know that it's only through my higher power in the program of Narcotics Anonymous that I am alive today and that I'm clean today. I would like to take a moment of silence to ask God to come into these rooms and let Him speak, especially since I don't know what I'm going to say. So. Thank you. The topic for this workshop is Reservations Rob Us. And I noticed that the first thing I did was notice that it ends in 3 dots, ... which means there's something more. And I am an addict, and I want the more. So I had to figure out what the rest of it really says. And so I did look it up in the basic text. And it's right in the first step. It says this quote. It says, "Until we let go of our reservations, no matter what they are, the foundation of our recovery is in danger. Reservations rob us of the benefits of the program has to offer. In ridding ourselves of all reservations, we surrender. Then and only then can we be helped to recover from the disease of addiction." So we have to get rid of our reservations. And again, so it says reservations rob us of the benefits of this that this program has to offer. So that's the whole quote. My next question is, well, what is a reservation? Because to me, a reservation is, I'm going to go to a restaurant, and it's probably one that needs reservations. If it is one, then I'll call ahead and I reserve a spot for something that I'm going to do in the future. I'm saving a spot for me for something I'm going to do in the future. And that's really, truly what this reservation is all about. But it talks about it in the It Works How and Why, what some reservations are. And again, this is within the first step. It says, we begin to let go of our reservations, those parts of ourselves that we won't surrender to the program. Most of us do have some reservations when we first get clean. Even so, we need to find ways of addressing them. And it gives you 5 different examples of reservations. One is the belief that because we've never had a problem with a particular drug, we can still use it. Another one is placing a condition on our recovery, such as only staying clean as long as our expectations are met. And another one is a belief that we can still be involved with the people that we were associated with in our addiction. And another one is the belief that we can use again after a certain amount of time clean. And the last one is a conscious or unconscious decision to work only certain steps. And I like this whole definition, these examples. It says the most important thing to know about reservations is that by keeping them, we are reserving a place in our program for relapse. So it's exactly the same definition of a reservation. We're saving a place for something that we're going to do in the future. Reservations rob us of the benefits of the program because we're reserving a place for relapse in it. And when I got to the program, I was beaten. This was truly a matter of life and death for me. I was literally at the last house on the block. I'm a low bottom addict. And when I got here, I was willing to go to any lengths to stay clean, to get clean, to do something different. Let's just say it that way. To do something different in my life, that my life could improve somehow. Because I could not go on living the way I was living. I really didn't have the nerve or the true desire to kill myself, but I could not go on living the way I was living. And I was willing to go to any lengths possible, any lengths necessary for my recovery. The problem is that, and you hear it all the time, you have people saying, well, if they told me to push a pee down with my nose all the way down Main Street, I'd do it. That I could have understood. And who knows? Nobody asked me to do that. They didn't ask me to do any crazy things that I can remember. But, I was so screwed up and so insane when I got here that and very few people here, I think, saw me during that first 3 months or even 9 months of my recovery. I don't remember much of it. I truly don't remember much of it. But I was absolutely insane. And there's no way I could even figure out what these things meant. I got to the program, and the first, I didn't know what reservations were. And I did read through the steps. I worked through the steps, but I don't remember reading anything about reservations at the time. I'm sure I was supposed to have read through them and done questions and all sorts of things, but I don't remember it. I do know that I had a major reservation, and that was that my last and worst drug of choice for me was crystal meth, and I had to give that up. So that's the one that I gave up when I got here, and I thought everything was going to be fine. That's the only one I had a particular problem with. It wasn't with alcohol, and it wasn't pot, and it wasn't amyl nitrate, and it wasn't cigarettes. And so I merely went on along without my drug of choice, thinking I was doing a fabulous job. And then I had a stroke. And that's when God said, you can't do it like this. You got to get clean or you're going to die. He literally hit me over the head with a 2x4. And I realized I had to give up all mood-changing, mind-altering drugs in order to survive. I work with a lot of men who, and we all have, I think, most of us here, who have a real big problem with, well, why should I stop drinking? Alcohol was never a problem. And I just want to cry because, I can watch them go out the door when they say that, unless we can get through to them, that it's simply one more drug, that it's simply a liquid drug. And it's hard to do that sometimes. It truly is. And the way I know is because I had, my whole idea of this individual drug was the only problem that I had. I did get here with that idea. I got here with the idea that if I stayed clean for a certain amount of time, then I would lose the resistance, and therefore I'd get high easier, so it would be cheaper, so I could afford it, so my life wouldn't be unmanageable anymore. That's called rationalization, and that's one of the 3 forms of denial. And but I did. I thought that if I stayed here for a while and got cleaned up for a while, that I could go back to using after a certain amount of time. I had a lot of expectations. I still do, and they're not always met. And you people just aren't doing your part. But I'm trying to learn that my expectations are not going to be met all the time. And so that was another thing that I had to face in early recovery, and it talks about a conscious decision or unconscious decision to only work at certain steps. And when I asked my sponsor to be my sponsor, I told him I already had worked step 1, and he it's a long story, but he made me go back to step 1. Let's just say that. I also tried to skip over step 6, and because, why do you need that? The other program doesn't. Oh, oops, sorry. Some other people don't always, spend a lot of time on 6 and 7, so I didn't think it was necessary to spend a lot of time on 6 and 7. Little did I realize that the rest of my life is living in 6 and 7, because I always have to try to improve myself and try to work on practicing spiritual principles, and I have to learn how to accept myself with the character traits that I have, and kind of deflate those defects into traits. And so it was tough, though. Another one, let's see, did we go through most of these? So I had some other reservations, too. And so this is what happened. I got an apartment, it's like that was really a big step because I had lost everything that I had, and I got an apartment, and I started, kind of cleaning up and stuff. After I had my stroke, that's when I quit smoking. So I decided to put my lighter, let me just throw it in the closet. It's a beautiful lighter. It's a Zippo, one of those standard plain Zippos. And of course I don't need the lighter fluid, so I'll put that up on the shelf in the closet too. And cleaning through things, emptying pockets and all that, I found some zigzags. Well, I'll just throw that up in the closet too. And then I found the amyl nitrate, a little bottle of something that you huff, and stuck that in the closet too. But the big one was, I used to smoke crystal meth, and that's not the only, I used every mode of administration that you have, but that was the most common one that I used. And right before I got clean, I had spent the time with someone to make the perfect pipe. And I had that pipe. And it was, and I can, not going to, but I can describe it in detail, down to the millimeter, how long it was, how it curled, what the clarity of the glass was, blah, 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 blah. And it was like, I've always wanted one just like this, so I'm going to keep it. So it went up in that closet. This is the God's honest truth. You talk about the insanity when we first get here in the program, and I'm trying to stay clean, and I'm saying, and my mind is not working the way it should be working, not that it does now all the time either, but so I said, well, what would be kind of nice is build a little shrine to all the things that I gave up. Pray, swear to God I did this. In the living room, on the coffee table. So now I've got the little, all these little things that I just told you that I put in the closet in a nice little shrine to all the things that I gave up. And different addicts would come over and just freak out. And they'd ask me why I was doing it. And I would say, oh, well, see, this is just a little remembrance of all the things that I gave up in order to quit. I'm no longer using all this stuff. And as time went on, I had more and more addicts come over. I got a sponsor. My sponsor started talking to me about reservations. And, God does for us what we can't do for ourselves. And after a while, when I don't do a step or a process within a step, God lets me know it's time to do it. And sometimes he's not all that gentle. Truly, he's not always that gentle. And I knew painfully that it was time to get rid of all this stuff. And so I called my sponsor and had him on the phone when I put all these things into a plastic bag and got a hammer. I mean, I'm saying, I can't do this. I was really hyperventilating. I was having cold sweats. I could barely speak. I didn't know what I was doing. It was one of the worst jonesing that I've ever done in recovery. And it was all because I was now making that a new final commitment, of break with my drug use. And I went outside with phone and put it on the sidewalk and hit it with the hammer and broke everything and threw it in the garbage, and I felt so empty. I felt like I had killed my lover. I really did. It was just painful. It was very, very painful. I knew it was the right thing to do. And my sponsor and I talked for a while after that, but I was really shaken by it. Now, the bottom line is, if you have a substantial amount of clean time in this program, let me tell you that this insanity can strike at any time. I had 2.5 years clean time when I did this. 2.5 years. That's not a newcomer. That's not where you should be at that point. Well, that's not where I think you should be, because it mentions reservations in the very, very, very first step, in the first part of the first step, that we need to get rid of our reservations, any reservations, no matter what they are. And that was, it shook me. It really did. I knew it was the right thing to do. I knew it was a spiritual thing to do. I knew I needed to do it for recovery. I knew I needed to do it to stay clean. I knew if I didn't do it, my sponsor would kill me. But it was still something that was so final. And it was just a remarkable thing for me to do. But that was a major, major, major reservation, and that's why I'm doing this workshop, because he just thought that this topic would be so wonderful for me to talk about, because I had such a problem with having reservations. I don't know how long I'm going to talk on this topic, because I don't have it all pre-planned like I often do. But I do want to say that in the back of the basic text, well, not the back, but further on, it talks about what happens later on in recovery. Because reservations don't have to just be handled when we get to recovery. When we first get to the tables and we're working step one for the first time, we need to look at the reservations. We need to do whatever we can do, whatever has to be done in order to get rid of those reservations. And but they do not believe that you'll never have one. New ones come up. You have new people in your life. You have new children in your life. You have new relationships. You have new things that are important now. You might have a fabulous job paying a lot of money, and that's important now. And if you lose that, well, I don't know if I can handle that, Or if you lose your partner, I don't know if I can handle that, And the one reservation that I had when I got here that I did know about, I looked at all my relationships and realized there was one person left in my life that was significant enough to be a reservation in my life. That's the one that was easy for me to recognize, and that's my identical twin brother. He was, by the way, it also talks, if you remember, it talks about that we can't associate with the people who we used to associate with when we were using. He was a using addict when I got to the program, and I knew I was supposed to stay away from him. I was living with my sister and her husband, who were using addicts also. I got out of the situation as soon as I could, but it was difficult to do that. But my identical twin brother, for people who have siblings in here, it's like there's a bond between siblings. There's a bond between brother and brother that's very, very strong. There's even a stronger bond, which is difficult to define, between twins. But the strongest bond, truly, are between identical twins. We literally have the same DNA. I can see a color and tell you whether he likes it or not. I mean, it's that we're that connected at the hip, and emotionally and so forth. And I did believe when I got here that's the reservation that I had to look at most at, was if he died, the fact that to me, I'm not saying this right, that if he died, I had a reservation that I would use over it. That was significant enough that I would use, because we've gone through all these years of life together, and we've done things that were how do I put this? We've had spiritual readings and so forth where it talks about how we're two bodies united in one soul. And I can't imagine going on living if my identical twin brother is dead. And I had to work on that, and I wrote on that. It took me quite a while to get through that, to tell you the truth. I now feel as if I'm on a train, and let me tell you, Narcotics Anonymous taught me this whole lesson also. I've taken a train from Boston to L.A., and back. And there are people who got on in Boston with me who got off in Chicago. There's people who got on in Chicago, got off in Albuquerque. There's people who got on in Boston and went all the way to LA. There's people who come and go in our lives. And it's like this moving train, and you have this community on that train, and people come and people go. They're there for a period. And one of the personal stories And personal stories are not my favorite part of the basic text, but the one line in the basic text story that I like is where this man loses his new girlfriend that he had, and he says now he realizes that all of the people in his life are just borrowed from God, and I like that idea. Then I got back to this part, because I was talking about later on in recovery. Don't believe that new reservations can't crop up, because there are new relationships in your life. There's new children, there's new jobs, there's all sorts of new things that you can use as a reservation. And in this part here, it talks about, it says, we are never forced to relapse. We were given a choice. Relapse is never an accident. Relapse is a sign that we have a reservation in our program. We begin to slight the program and leave loopholes in our daily lives. Unaware of the pitfalls ahead, we stumble blindly in the belief that we can make it on our own. Sooner or later, we fall into the illusions that the drugs made our life easier. And that's what a reservation is. It's not necessarily that nowadays that I'm going to go use. It's that, enough people at that meeting pissed me off, I'm not going to go back to it. I don't need to do any more service work. It's like so many people don't understand me, that I'm not going to do that, and I don't like that step. Screw it. I've been through that step once. I don't have to do it again. And so we leave these holes in our program, and we have to be very, very, very careful. It says in the basic text that complacency is the enemy of addicts with a substantial amount of clean time, and I believe that. I heard that very early in recovery, and I still believe that. I try to keep it in mind every day. I have an intensity in Narcotics Anonymous. I feel an intensity in Narcotics Anonymous that is just incredible. This is a matter of life and death. I got a sponsee 2 weeks ago on Sunday. Talked to him on Tuesday, 3 days later. And he hung up the phone from me, called his girlfriend, and hung up from her, and took a utility knife and cut his arm from his wrist to his shoulder. And his mother gave him chest compressions. They took him to the hospital. They used the veins in his legs to replace the arteries in his arm. And they thought he died, but he didn't. They thought he had brain damage, but he didn't. They thought he was going to lose his arm, but he didn't. He's alive. He was just discharged to the Medicine Center. And I care so much for my sponsees that it hurts so much to see them go through what they have to go through. When I did my 5th step, my sponsor said, one of your major ways that you do wrong things is that you try to care for people, you try to save people. I have that whole savior complex. I can't get somebody clean, and I can't keep somebody else clean. I cannot force recovery down their throat. I try every day, and it never succeeds. I'll let you know if it ever works, but it hasn't so far. I care an awful lot about my sponsees. I talk to them, and as most people in this room know, I've gone through a lot of physical things since I got into recovery. The only diagnosis I had prior to recovery was that I'm HIV positive. Everything else came after I got here. And name a body part, and I have that body part failing, basically. And so I was able to go in and talk to him in the hospital. I'm on call at the hospital for people who go through detox, to go up to talk to them. All the nurses and doctors and the chaplain know me, and so they call me to come up and talk to him. And I was able to sit down with him and talk to him about that, you know, it's not time to feel guilty here. We need to move forward. That he, like everyone else, is a child of God, and we are worthy. That he's a child of God and that he is worthy. You know, we have the spark of creation within us. What can be more part of God than that? And we really have a responsibility to take care of our bodies, to take care of ourselves. But I was able to communicate with him in a way that many other addicts couldn't, because I've been through all the health problems I've been through. You know, he lost 6 pints of blood. You have a total of 8. That's fine. I lost 7, you know. Not trying to one-up you here, but you'll make it. You'll make it, you know. He showed me his scars on his leg. I showed him my scars on my leg from taking out the vein, you know. So I was able to communicate with him on a way that truly is based on experience. And I heard you today, you know, I kept asking people what I should talk about in this, and they said, just be truthful. And that's what I am, being truthful. The only time, the time that I can be most helpful to anyone else, and the best way I can carry the message is by letting people know exactly what my story is. You know, true or false. I have dirty laundry. I have all sorts of things that are not the, you know, the typical way to recovery. It's not the, you know, certainly don't recommend doing it my way, but this is what I did, and this is how I got through it, you know. The whole idea about the healthcare thing, I have to bring up one more time, because I was diagnosed as HIV positive before I got to recovery. And I had already made up my mind with what happened in the 80s and 90s, that if it got bad enough, that I would kill myself. And that really is one of the major reasons that I went into the worst of my active addiction. I thought I was going to die. My lover had just died of AIDS, and I believed that I didn't have much longer. So why not party? Why not use? Why not do whatever you can do? I finished a college degree. I got a good job that paid a whole lot of money, and I used all that money on drugs. But God has this bizarre sense of humor, and he kept me alive. And then, you know, I woke up one day and I'd spent all my IRAs, and I was still alive. And now I had to deal with the problem. You know, it was another 10 years down the road. Things were much worse. My body's falling apart. I'm older. I lost my job, my car, my house, blah, da, 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 da. And so, yeah, he had a whole different idea for me when I got into recovery. And I know now, I absolutely know now, with what I've gone through since I got here, that there is absolutely nothing physically, nothing that can physically happen to me, or mentally, that can happen to me that would entertain the idea of me wanting to use. Now, I can't say that'll never happen, but where I stand now in my relationship to my higher power, it's not in the cards, because I already know that faced with the diagnosis of end-stage renal disease, faced with the diagnosis of a complete heart failure, faced with the diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, faced with you know, all these different diagnoses, that I can get through them as long as I use the tools of the program and hang around with all the people in the fellowship and read the literature. You know, I read the literature a lot, and I don't mean to quote it all the time, but I know damn well that this is the Word of God, because it's a group conscience. This is not an individual addict's individual history or story in the first half. It is a group conscience. So I know that God is within those pages that talk about the steps, that talks about what all the readings mean. And I know I can get through it, no matter what the next diagnosis is. I can use it. I can certainly use it as an excuse You can always use, I can use anything as an excuse, you know? Drop the pin again, time to use. You know? So it doesn't matter what the excuse is, but it would be an excuse, and I know that now that it would be an excuse. God has told me that in my heart that no matter what the outcome is, that it'll be okay. It really will be okay. My goal is to come to an understanding of being spiritual enough to accept whatever those consequences are. And there's no reason in my life now that I can see that would make me use. Not to say that it'd never happen. I have no reservations that I can find, and I'm always looking because we have to be vigilant. It says, again, in the basic text, that as we go on the path of recovery, the path gets narrower and the path gets steeper, and that's true. It does get harder. We picked the low-hanging fruit already. Now we have to deal with the real bullshit that's going on in our head. You know what I mean? And I've spoken long enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good stuff there. Okay. Our next speaker is Mitch P. I would introduce more, but that's all I know.
And that's just enough. Name says it all. I'm an addict named Mitch. Hey, Mitch. And I'm just going to share my experience, strength, and hope. It's a nice watch. Speaking about robbing us, you know, and I'm not going to quote the basic text. If I do, it's by accident. You know, I lost my little brother 367 days ago, but who's counting? He took, when he went to the hospital for his last visit and he knew he was dying, he took his crack pipe. And I guess he must have had some reservations, you know, that he was going to get out of there, but he didn't. And I went, you know, and I think people can get this program the first time. I really believe that because I have friends who have been here for an awful long time who came and got it and, you know, and didn't do everything right, but did just enough to turn that corner without any reservations and to make it. I wasn't that guy. You know, it was a struggle for me for a couple years, and I didn't, you know, in spite of the fact that all the bad shit that happened to me in my early childhood and through my using and you know, I didn't really even recognize that I had a problem until I could no longer function in society. You know, divorce, job really wasn't working out. So, you know, my immediate solution to that, which is still one of my immediate solutions today, is just run. You know, and they told me when I got out of treatment, they said, you know, they sit you all down and give you your odds of making it and tell you whether or not you're going to make it. And they told me I wasn't going to make it. And I thought, you know, okay. I thought a lot of things, you know, a lot of things were going, because treatment back then was like 28 days. You know, hell, I've been here a month. I hadn't stayed anywhere a month for a long time. And, you know, and so I packed everything up because I still had some shit left. And I moved to Florida and became a bartender. And, you know, that was my best plan for my mother, who was my greatest enabler and my best using buddy. And I really hadn't spent a lot of time with my mother. The last time, I grew up in Fort Wayne, and the last time I saw my mother in Fort Wayne, I had to track her down at Broadway Joe's there on Broadway and play a little gin rummy with her before she moved to Florida. So I had some reservations. You know, I knew about the program. I I didn't want to put in the effort. And what I've learned after being around here for a while is, you know, the things that I need to do, like this workshop, are the things that I don't want to do, you know. And the 4-step, for instance, is intimidating. People don't want to do the 4-step because they're worried about having to write, you know. They're all about the same. You know, it takes time. The first time isn't going to be perfect. That's okay. It's just important for me to keep putting one step in front of the other and to keep progressing, you know, to keep in this process of recovery. And I've tried to do that. I remember, you know, what a struggle it was trying to cut corners and shoot angles, trying to do things my way. You know, and I had tried other stuff. You know, I had tried religion, and that didn't really work for me at that time. I wasn't in a real religious frame of mind. I first realized that I had a problem with my ex-wife, who really had no interest other than, you know, maybe getting a check every week, which she wasn't getting anyway. But she said, you know, I think you got a drinking problem. So I went to this place that they deal with drinking problems, and they said, you know, you really shouldn't drink. And so I thought, okay, I won't drink. So I would go to the same bar every night until 4 in the morning, and I would sit in the same stool, and, you know, I would not drink. I would use another substance all night so that I could stay awake, but I wouldn't drink. And I thought, well, okay, this is working good. And nothing changed, you know. She still wasn't getting her check. My life wasn't getting any better. I wasn't getting any sleep. I wasn't able to go to work. I wasn't able to think clearly anymore. But I had those reservations, you know. And I was kind of stumbling around trying to figure out what's wrong with me, what's my problem, you know. And I hadn't done any searching and fearless moral inventory at that time. I hadn't really delved into my childhood and figured out where it was that I became a total screw-up in life and where the wheels fell off. But the wheels fell off long before I was eating out of dumpsters and copping dope in neighborhoods where I wouldn't even go today. The wheels had fallen off long before that. I just didn't know it. You know, the wheels had fallen off emotionally, and those are the reservations I think about, you know, the emotional reservations, the detachment from society, the detachment from human contact. That's what dope allowed me to do, to just detach. I didn't give a shit about anything. I had no self-esteem. I had no pride. I had no spiritual awareness. I had no honesty, open-mindedness, or willingness. I had none of the spiritual principles left that this program has infused with time into me. And I don't always have them today, you know, but I do the best I can only because of this program, Narcotics Anonymous. This is what has allowed me to live life. There is no question in my mind that had I kept on the path that I was on, you know, 20 years ago, that I would be dead today, that I wouldn't have been able to do the things that have made me feel so good about myself. And it's not about what I get out of what I do. It may have been at one time. It's not about that today. It's about what I can do to help other people. You know, reservations. It's still difficult, I think, even after all this time. It's hard to get close to people. You know, Jonathan was talking about the train analogy. Man, this train's a bullet train. People are on and off so quick, I barely know their names. It's kind of like my stepdaughter's boyfriends. I don't even learn their names anymore. You know, I've stopped. I don't even want to know their names because, you know, in 6 months they'll be gone. And unfortunately, her boyfriends last longer than some people in this program. And it's hard. It's sad. I don't remember what year it was or what their names were. I could probably think of a few of their names if I really tried. But the Grateful Dead was traveling around and everybody was following them, and we had a whole influx of young people that were really thriving in the program, and they all went off to follow the Grateful Dead and they never came back. You know, and it was hard, but I mean that's part. And there was a passel of them. I mean, it wasn't just one or two; it was about 10 of them, and they just left. And I hope wherever they went that they found what they were looking for, because you know, what other people choose to do with their lives today isn't a reservation for me. I really wish them the best. And I shared this in my home group, which is the Sharing Care meeting in Chesterton, Indiana, the best group in the world. And if you don't believe that about your home group, then find a new one. But, you know, I shared that about that and that concept that what people do in their lives is really up to them. I don't control other people today. There's times where I'd like to, but you know, the choices they make are their choices, and they have to be responsible for their choices, and they have to live with the consequences of those choices, whatever those may be. And one of my sponsees told me, you know, I really appreciate that you never judge me, and I don't. I really honestly don't. I may not agree with some things people do, and that's not directed at any one person or sponsee. I may not think that, but, you know, they have to make their own choices. And I wasn't always like that, not at all. I was pretty opinionated for a lot of years in my recovery, and you know, and I was not shy about letting people know what I thought and how it should go, and making damn sure that that's the way it went. And I did the best I could with what I had. And the other thing is, when I got clean, there wasn't anybody with 20 years clean around here. You know, we were our role models, who now, you know, are still around, some of them, if they're still going to meetings. But the role models that I had in recovery had maybe 5 years, 7 years clean. And today I know, having been around for a while, that that's really not a lot of time. You know, that things have not cleared up, that there are still reservations, there's still a lot of conflict inside. I remember when I was trying to get clean, one of many times, because I went to my first treatment in '86. I didn't get clean till '88. I remember I had landed my ass in Miami, broke, homeless, hungry, wore out. And I think this was like the it was the first time I went to treatment, when they threw me out into the mental ward because I was antisocial personality disorder. That's what he told me. And he was right. You know, I mean, as much as I hate him, I still have resentments towards this psychiatrist in the wheelchair, you know. He was right. And I got to confess, I was pretty antisocial. And so they put me in the mental ward for 3 days because I was a danger to myself or others. And I shared this, at 8 years, I was still a danger to myself and others, with 8 years clean. But at that point, I had like 8 days maybe. And in a pretty rough life. And so I get out of the mental ward and I go to this huge meeting hall where there's just like 150 people at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, you know, on a daily basis, just constant, 24/7 meetings. It would be very impressive to me now. It really was just a place to get some sleep and some food at the time. So I was broke perpetually, and this person gave me $5, you know. So here I am. I'm standing on the sidewalk, and I'm walking back and forth toward the restaurant, toward the dope house, toward the restaurant, toward the dope house, back and forth. Must have been a half an hour. I'd walk half a block down, half a block back. I didn't know what to do. I was confused. I ended up going to the restaurant. A couple people in recovery let me stay on their floor that night, you know. And I'd like to say I got it then, but I really didn't. And I'd ask my sponsor, why can't I get this? Why do I have to keep getting these white key tags? And he said, because you're just not willing yet. You know, I wasn't willing to let go of those things, to let go of that lifestyle, you know. I pretty much lost everything getting here, and I've had some hard times in recovery. I remember at 2 years clean just laying in a little shithole apartment with all the curtains were gone because she took them, and just blowing smoke into the light coming through those little blinds and just watching that for days, you know. I mean, it was days I didn't move. And probably till I ran out of cigarettes. But, and I ran out of cigarettes or whatever. I finally moved. I got the will and the energy to move. And I went to a meeting. And I cried, you know. And this newcomer, Mary, was there. And because I said, I just don't know if I can do this anymore. I mean, I was pretty involved in Narcotics Anonymous, even at that point. And this lady, Mary, said, what do you mean you can't do this anymore? You are the one that brought us the message that came to our treatment center that have been our hope for all this time, and now you're saying you're going to quit? You know? And she kind of read me the riot act and got me out of myself, you know, and that's what it is. That's what those reservations are. When I get all right inside, everything's good. You know, I don't have to worry about what's going on around me, what somebody else is doing, because I can do a searching and fearless moral inventory of everybody in this room. I can do that on a moment's notice. But, you know, I need to be looking inside. I can pick out all of my wife's character defects. They're easy. You know, what about me? You know, and those are the reservations, you know. I don't want to work those steps. It's painful at times, and it gets more painful as you get more time. There is a lot of stuff inside of me. There's a lot of things that led me to where I ended up. Where I ended up was bad enough, but how I got there is a real son of a bitch. You know, it's hard to become that mentally and emotionally depraved to end up where we end up. And the real blessing is, and the real key to this is, something gets us there, you know. Well, and I don't want to believe that it's intelligence, because I didn't feel like I had a lot of brain cells left by the time I got there. It's some spiritual thing. There's something good inside of us that something, some being, someone wants to save, whether it's a judge, a counselor, a higher power, whatever it is that gets us here, you know, a spouse, an ex-spouse, kids. But the key is, when we get here, we've got to apply the principles, work the steps, and want to be here. That's how we stay. Those are the things that we cannot have reservations about. I have no reservations today about this program and what it's done in my life. I have a better understanding, you know, of people, of myself, of how we interact, and I rely a lot on the serenity prayer. You know, I think with time and age and maturity and all of the things that this program has given me, that I have a little more wisdom today, that I have an understanding that people do the things that they do just because they're human beings. And that I don't have to internalize every action that occurs outside of me. That what happens in life is really going to be okay. It is okay. And, you know, a lot of people make fun of me for saying those things, but it's really honestly what I believe. And what I want to learn is how to love people, you know? There are people in my life, through my recovery, that just have this capacity for love that just astounds me, because that's been a real difficult part of my life. You know, it's hard, it's hard to let people into your life, especially newcomers, knowing that they might only be here for 30 days, 60 days, maybe 6 months, maybe they'll overdose, maybe they'll kill themselves. Or old timers, I'm starting to lose people right and left. My brother was just the beginning of a chain of deaths in my life this year. From my sponsor of 17 years, Victor, who I was at his first H&I meeting when he came through a treatment center. He had 18 years clean. Freddie Aquino, who used to take me to see the Cubs whip the Dodgers out in LA. Well, that's how I remember it. He might remember it differently. Just good close friends. Jeff G. from the office, Mike P., who I served with at the World Service Conference, who did the conventions. These were all close personal friends of mine only because of the program of Narcotics Anonymous. And yet, not once, as these people are dropping over like flies, did I ever feel like using. I don't think like that. I don't use today. It's not part of who I am. Reservations about service work. I got to talk about that, because that's really what has, there was a lot of time in my life, I think, in Narcotics Anonymous, where the only reason that I've been able to stay clean, or have stayed clean as long as I have, is because I've been involved in service work. And at the onset, it was really all about me and all about ego, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the conclusion I came to. And all of this is just me, my hope, strength, and experience. That's all I got. But I got all that from you people, so. And I didn't go to a lot of meetings. And I didn't have a lot of sponsees. But I had a lot of close friends and people that I loved and cared about when I wasn't arguing with them or telling them how screwed up they were. But, we still loved each other, and we still prospered and thrived in our recovery. But, there came a time when even I was still involved in service work where that just wasn't enough. And I realized, I needed to recommit to more meetings, and then when you go to more meetings and then you end up with more sponsees, and so now I have this full plate, and I have no reservations about it. It's been beautiful. I've had to cut back on some service work, but I'm still overly involved in this and other things, because as you get alive, you get things outside of that. I've got all that too. Other organizations notice that you have skills and talents that you learned in Narcotics Anonymous, and they'll put you to work there for the same pay. But I don't have any reservations. And there's been some hard things in service. It's hard to be involved in an area and not be there anymore. And it's hard to let go. It's hard to be involved in a convention or any aspect, a region, whatever it's been. It's hard to walk away and let other people do it and let other people receive the benefits and learn the lessons that I've learned. And I don't know if I ever thought I could stay clean without, being involved in service, but I think I can. And I'm still involved, so time will tell, though, because my wife's already planning my service commitment in 4 years. Like, who the hell even knows if I'll be alive in 4 years? God dang, But so we got this plan, and I'm just, yeah, okay, but I have no reservations about my recovery. I have no reservations about the fact that this program works. And where I've gotten that from is by being here and working the program and seeing the people that make it. And are there certain things that are required? Sure. And we all know what those are. And if we don't, then we need to get with a sponsor and get with the literature and get to the meetings and get involved in service and do the things that people tell us to do. Stay out of the bars, stay away from the old friends. And, you know, quite frankly, before my brother died, I didn't spend a lot of time with him over the years. I talked to him a few months before he died because, and I got to talk about my brother a little, because I really loved my little brother. And he became what he was because of me. And he just didn't make it. And I hate to talk about my little brother, but I got to. You know, I talked to him on the phone, and because my mom's living in this crack house, you know, he's boarded up in the room, he's caught the goddamn mattress on fire. I mean, not just a little hole, the whole thing was burned when we moved it out. I mean, burned. I don't know how he didn't burn the house down. But, you know, and there's dope dealers coming and going, and it's a situation that we could relate to. And he's living it. And my mom has locked herself in her room and, you know, has a key on her door, et cetera, and she's living hostage to this. So there's some discussion about how to get rid of my brother. So I talked to him on the phone, and he's reliving, like, what year would that have been? 1976, when he was just a kid. And he said, you know, I was abandoned. And, you know, he really needed to be talking to his sponsor, doing the 4-step, et cetera, et cetera. And he was going over this car that he had that was stolen. And I'll be damned, when we went through his stuff, he still had the title to that car that was stolen from in front of my sister's house that he was bitching about. And, you know, I told him a lot of times, you know, you need to go to meetings. He had gone to meetings. He had gone to treatment. He was on probation. He was facing going to prison. He was doing all of the things that happened to all of us. And it was just tragic, you know. And I couldn't get through to him. And he knew where I was and what I was doing. He had me thrown in jail in 1986, you know. So, I mean, I don't know. I miss my brother, you know, and I miss a lot of my brothers and sisters who have been in this program over the years and who are gone. Whether they stayed clean and just died or whether they just left. And I could tell a lot of stories about that. So, I don't know. I'm looking at this nice watch, and it's, you know, it's saying it's almost time to go. I think I've shared about all I can share. I love each and every one of you in spite of myself, and that's all I got.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mitch. Well, for those that would care to, will you help me close this meeting with a group hug and the Serenity Prayer?